Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to, I guess what we're calling Pitch World. I am going to go ahead and make sure that this thing is live. If you're watching right now, go ahead and try to add a comment, um, and then we'll start jumping in from there. Um, my name is Carlo Gonzales-Moss. I am an executive, writer, producer, all of that good stuff. So we're just going to wait a couple minutes here for everybody to be able to hop in. We're a little bit early, but today we're going to be going through we're going to do a walkthrough of what I call the my pitch structure. Looks like there's all right. Wi-Fi looks like it's starting to boot up. Um, so it looks like we're starting to get some people up in here. Awesome. If one of y'all could go ahead and just put a comment in the comment box so I can make sure that that's working well, because we'll be using that throughout our class today. We're going to be going for an hour today. And we're just going to give probably another minute or two for everybody to be able to get in. All right, awesome. It looks like those comments are coming in. So while we're waiting to start, and we're giving it a couple of minutes, I would love to know, those of you that are watching, what your level of experience is with pitching. If you've pitched before, or if this is something brand new to you. I'm super excited to be able to do this with Catalyst. This, is kind of my wheelhouse. So what I love to do is I love sharing the art of pitching with everybody. It's something that I've been doing for a long time. And fortunately, something that I guess, you know, after a while started making sense to me. And for whatever reason in our industry, I feel like a lot of people keep it as a walled garden for whatever reason. So let me know what y'all's experience is with pitching. All right, one of you is brand new to pitching. I love it. Um, the irony of pitching is you don't get to do anything else in the business. You don't get to make your show without pitching. And so everybody has to learn this. Everybody does this. And it behooves you as a writer, as a producer, an actor, a creator of any sort to be able to learn how to do this and how to do this well. Um, awesome. Another newbie. Love it. So I'm going to give it about another minute, and then we're going to jump into our first class here. While we're waiting, I'll walk you through kind of the vision for what we have for the next few weeks. I envision this as a 7-week class, ultimately culminating at the Catalyst Festival with a live workshop where we kind of tie everything together and we're able to really dig in and walk out of this experience feeling like you're completely ready to go pitch a show right now. Awesome. You pitched projects before, hungry to learn. That's the exact way to be. Also, I apologize if I don't refer to you by name, because on my end, if you guys are on Facebook and you're leaving comments, it just says Facebook user. So if you want, you can feel free to put your name in your comment there, and I'll respond to it there. Otherwise, let's jump into it. Let's talk about pitching. Today is basically going to be a roadmap for the next 7 weeks of our lives, talking about pitching and getting really good at it. So, a little bit of backstory on me. I started off, got my degree in experimental theater, lots of really, really weird stuff. Came to LA, got into comedy, went through UCB, went through IO, was acting, and then uh, ended up having a YouTube series that kind of hit big back in 2013. I guess actually we started in 2011, called Most Popular Girls in School, which is a stop motion animated series. Basically, South Park meets Mean Girls with Barbie dolls. And that opened the door for me. We ended up doing, I think, 5 seasons of that show. It ended up hitting about 150 million views, just crossed over into a million subscribers. And that was my way into actually working professionally and getting to quit my day job. That led to me starting my own animation studio. I ran that for about 7 years, called Extra Credit Studios. That was actually how I first met the good folks at Catalyst. Was through one of my employees. Was a mutual connection there. And so in that process, as I built out my animation studio, we started having to pitch, and we started being pitched to, and we really quickly figured out, oh, this is something that we have to get good at. So after I left Extra Credit, I went to work for the Russo brothers as their senior director of development. Um, was there for about a year, and since then left there to launch my own company, which is what I do now, called MARANTY Media, that specializes in the art of the pitch. And so what I bring to the table and what MARANTY brings to the table is experience from both sides, being a creator, pitching, selling shows. In the past, I've sold shows to Freeform, uh, NBC Universal, Sci-Fi, a whole bunch of places, and have relationships at all of the networks, with all of those executives. Some of my projects in the past have worked with Charlize Theron, Ronda Rousey, Eric Andre, whole bunch of people, and because I've seen it from both sides, this is something that I have a unique understanding of. So let's stop talking about me. Let's start talking about pitching. Like I said, there's a walled garden of pitching right now, which unfortunately has always existed. And my whole thing, my ethos is to demystify that and bring that into availability for every single one of you so that you not knowing what the rules of pitching are is not the thing holding you back. So when we talk about pitching, the analogy I like to use is pitching is to writing as auditioning is to acting. It is a totally separate but completely necessary skill set that you will have to learn. Like you can be a great actor, but if you don't know how to audition, congratulations, you're not going to work. Same thing with writing and producing and pitching. If you have a great idea, that's awesome. If you don't know how to take that idea from your head and put it in front of an executive in a way that's going to make them want to buy your show, it's not going to get made. So it is completely necessary. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through my pitch structure that I use for all of my pitches. I work a lot with creators. As an executive, that was one of my big things where I really excelled, was working directly with creators and getting their pitches up to snuff. And so I have a structure that I always use. And my goal today is to introduce the overall structure of a pitch so that all of you are on the same page with me. And then that'll create a roadmap for the next 6 weeks as we dive into each essential element of a pitch. So, also, if you have any questions, please, please, please leave them in the comments. I am hoping that I'm able to bust through this within an hour so that we have plenty of time for questions at the end of this session. And then, like I said, we'll be meeting for the next 6 weeks. I also sweat like crazy, so fair warning on that. So, in thinking about pitching, the first thing we talk about is the pre-pitch. So, right now, obviously, the world is in a very different place than it was, pre-pandemic. And so most of our pitches are going to be on Zoom. Very few of them are going to be in person. Um, Things to think about when you pitch on Zoom: lighting. Where are you pitching? Your audio. Making sure that all of those things are taken care of. A lot of this stuff has probably been covered in a bunch of other subjects, topics. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But both in person and remote, think about the things that you're going to need to make your pitch as successful as possible. Um, make sh- Make sure that you're not rushing to do anything directly before your pitch. It's easy when you're at home to go, oh, okay, well, I have to do this, this, and this, and then have this pitch right at 12. Make sure that you give yourself that 10-minute buffer zone so you can get set. You can figure out where the link is that you're supposed to click into, all of that good stuff. If you are pitching in person, one of the small little advantages that I always tell all of my clients is that you will get offered a water bottle. Take that water bottle, because not only is your voice going to get parched, from speaking for 20 minutes straight. But also, if you get a question that you don't know about, that gives you about 5, 10 seconds to think. So that's a little trick. So always take the water bottle that you're offered. Especially when you're pitching on Zoom, it can be kind of awkward, kind of uncomfortable. Make small talk with the executives before you jump in. Um, we're people too. That to me is always a huge thing. Like, create a comfortable environment. Ask people how their day is going. Ask them if they have plans for the weekend. Just talk to them like people. Um, Also, when you're pitching, before you jump into your pitch, ideally you have somebody there to do the bragging for you. So you don't have to say, as you might know, I have done this, this, and this, and I have this accomplishment, and I'm wonderful and great. Ideally, you're in that room either with a producer, um, perhaps a studio executive who's already on the project, maybe your manager. That person can do the bragging for you both in the room and when they set up the meeting, so that you don't have to sit there and talk about how great you are, because that's always going to be a turn off. The last thing that I always recommend pre-pitch is come in with a presentation, with a PowerPoint. It's a lot more work, but it's going to make it so much easier on you. It's going to visually reinforce the things that you're saying, the characters that you're talking about, and it's like the big thing that I always emphasize is executives do not know the names of your characters. They are not familiar with this at all. So make their life easier. When you're talking about a character, and we'll get into this when we talk about characters, like, put their name in big letters on your PowerPoint. So come in with the PowerPoint. Ideally, you have somebody to run your PowerPoint that's not you, because it can be very, very confusing and very stressful to try to run your own presentation while you're also trying to pitch and make this thing as exciting as possible. So either it's a writing partner, either it's a producer, somebody else in the room that can give you that helping hand, so that all you have to focus on is just being your awesome self and telling them all about your show. So, with that being said, the other thing, as we get into the intro, that I always recommend and that I always use is a script. There's all when I talk about pitching with people, there's always this back and forth of, I don't want to sound too rehearsed. I want to make sure that I sound casual and conversational. At the very least, walk in with an outline. When I pitch in room, I like to walk in with a printed out piece of paper that has a bunch of different colors, that's really cleanly organized, because what it tells that executive is, I value your time, and I value it so much that I did the work ahead of time. I spent the time knowing that I was going to come in here and take up 20, 30 minutes of your time. I did the work because your time is valuable and I treat it as such. So I love coming in with a script. That might not be ideal for you. It all depends on what kind of a performer you are. But figure out what works. I always recommend using a script and putting as much on paper as humanly possible. So now, in thinking about your intro, the first thing to understand, your pitch should be no longer than 20 minutes max. You want to shoot for 18 ideally. If you can get it less than that, great. But there's a term that I came up with called the energetic cliff. And what the energetic cliff is somewhere between minutes 18 to 20. If you don't have a very good pitch, it usually happens a little bit earlier, but somewhere around minutes 18 to 20, you your executive who's listening to you and wants to buy your show, their brain will fall off of an energetic cliff for whatever reason. Either they've lost interest, they're thinking about lunch, they have something else on their mind, they're thinking about the next meeting they have to go to, but you can sense it in a pitch if you're paying attention. And after that moment, any word that comes out of your mouth doesn't really matter. So that's why we keep things short and brief and only give enough information as is truly necessary. So when we start our pitch, and again, this whole class today is going to be just straight up overview, very, very top level broad strokes. And over the next 6 weeks, we're going to be digging in, getting really granular with the details and breaking up all of these sections individually. So, intro. The main thing that you want to get across in your intro is your personal connection to what you're pitching. And here's why this is important. Your executive, whoever you're pitching to, whether it's a producer, an attachment, a studio, whoever it is, they're going to have to go and pitch this idea to their boss, because odds are you're not pitching to somebody who has complete control of the checkbook and can go ahead and just unilaterally make a decision. So when that person is pitching to their boss, it's a lot easier for them to sell your show by going, oh, well, this person, they wrote a show about baseball and they actually used to be a professional baseball player and their dad actually played in the big leagues. And it makes it very, very easy for them to connect those dots to their boss. So it can be anything from walking that executive through what your personal experience is with the material. It might even be, you know, here's how I got to this idea. Just give us a little peek into your brain, tie it in some way. And from there, you want to find a connective tissue that gets you from that intro, from that personal connection over to the actual story that you're selling, because that's where you want your focus to be. I'll give you some examples of personal connections that I'm talking about. I have one show that I'm producing where the creator wrote it about surfing, and he grew up in Long Island, and he wrote the story about the town that he grew up in. That's an easy personal connection. And he just started thinking about, oh, my friend like this, my friend like this. And it's a bonkers animated show about a guy with a shark in the middle of his belly. But there's still a personal connection, even if you're crazy high concept. Because when you're in that room, the last thing that you want to say is, I don't know, this just sounded funny to me, so I just wrote it. It's way, way easier for that executive that you're pitching to, A, to see why you wrote it. It answers that question of why you, and B, to then pitch it to their boss. And then people start to believe in this thing. It feels like there's momentum behind it. And so that's why we create a personal connection. From that personal connection, you then find the connective tissue to the actual story that you're pitching. All right. So then, and again, please, please, please feel free to leave comments as you're watching this. I'm keeping an eye on those as I'm going through here. So any questions that pop up, anything that you'd like me to dive a little bit more into, feel free to throw a comment in there. Next, we have the series overview. The first job of the series overview is to get out your nuts and bolts. That is the boring stuff that an executive will ask immediately if you don't hit that. So when I say nuts and bolts, I'm talking about the format, genre, the length, the serialization, all of those questions, right? So just, right off the bat, this show is a 30-minute animated action comedy set in the world of da da da, right? Get that out, boom, all of those questions are answered. Ideally, knock it out in a sentence. Yeah, it's a little bit mechanical, but it's worth getting the information out there. From there, throw out your log line. This should also be presented visually as you're speaking. And then give me a brief overview of the story. When I say a brief overview, I just want you to give the executive an idea of where we're going. We're setting a roadmap. Start bringing up names of characters, start talking about the locations, all of that, all of the little things that go into getting somebody excited for the beginning of your story, right? Use some examples from actual shows. When you introduce a character for the first time, make sure you're presenting them with context. Set all of the important things that a buyer needs to know before you jump into anything else. Get them excited and go ahead and we're setting the table. Of course, my outline in front of me is going haywire, so bear with me a second. But in thinking about the series overview, what you want to leave with is you want the buyer excited and you want them to know every single thing that they need to understand in the briefest amount of time possible. If it's the location, if it's the tone, very, very top level stuff. This is all just building a roadmap for the rest of your pitch. From there, after series overview, you're going to go into your characters. You're going to start with your main character and move down in order of importance. It's exactly as simple as it seems. Now, when you're building out characters in a pitch, there's a few important things we need to know about your characters. Number one, their personality. What are they like on a day to day basis? Number two, how do they relate to the other characters on the show? Number three, how do others feel about them? And number four, what's their role on the show? Um, it might differ in a dramatic and a comedic setting. If you're pitching a comedy, what you want to do is give us an idea of where that character's comedy is going to come from. If it's a drama, give us an idea of where they sit in relation to the main character. Are they going to be creating action? What is their actual role on the show? The next thing with characters, please, please, please feel free to use comps. Make sure when you're using comps, uh, short for comparisons, uh, you want to use them in combination with one another. So, we never want to pitch a character as he's just like he's just like Jeff Winger from Community, or he's just like Walter White. You want to give us a few different flavors. TV executives are very well versed in the world of TV and in all of the characters. So if you, I love using lots and lots of different characters from all across the TV universe and movies as well to give an idea of what a character is. You might want to say he's George Costanza meets Abby from Broad City. Um, Usually, 2 to 3 character combinations will create a wholly new character, and it's a real great shorthand to get across exactly who and what your character is. Yeah, make sure that you're using more than one because otherwise you're just ripping off an existing character. Keep backstory to a minimum. Focus on what the character is going to do on the show. So backstory is awesome. Put it in your series Bible. A pitch is not the place to tell us all about a bunch of stuff that we're not going to see on the screen. And feel free to use your personal relationship to a character. You might say, this character is based on my mom. My mom was this, and this, and I based this character off of her, or this character is how I think of myself on my best days. Something like that. Absolutely throw that in. Don't feel like you have to do that for every character though. But keep any place that you can tie it back to your own story and who you are as a person. That's compelling. That gives me as an executive something to believe in. Then another big thing with characters, use tangible examples from the show to illustrate your character's personality. I can't tell you how many times I've been pitched and all that I hear is this character is this, and they're this, and they're this. They're kind, they're nice, they are sweet, and they are special. Okay, cool. Show me the ways in which they are kind. If you tell me a story that's going to happen in the show about them doing something sweet for underprivileged kids every week, okay, I have an idea of who this person is. But if you just tell me, oh well, they're very compassionate or they're very funny, okay, that doesn't do anything for me. Give me an example. Show me what they're going to do on the show, and then on top of that, you can get rid of that sentence where you're telling me what they are because you just showed me. You know, the structure that I like to use a lot is, this character is, he's very, very insecure. For example, if you were to say da 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 da, um, give an example from the show of that character being insecure, and if it's a comedy, let that end with a laugh line. Each one of your characters, as you're going through the pitch, needs to have at least one laugh line in their section. One of my pet peeves, and this is a term that I guess I coined, your characters need to be able to sit down, which means your character needs a butt. If they're just one thing, that's not interesting. A character that you're writing should not just be one color, one flavor, right? You shouldn't have a character that's just nice or a character that's just a douchebag. What makes a character interesting is their butt. This guy's a huge douchebag, but in actuality, he's extremely insecure about himself and puts that out in all kinds of ways, right? Michael Scott is the boss from hell, but underneath that is a deeply insecure person. And that's what's going to give us compelling characters is that but that they're this, but also they're this, it's some basic storytelling there, right? Of how to create that really, really compelling character and making sure that that but is represented in your pitch, not just in your show, right? These are the types of things as opposed to backstory that we want to make sure are in that pitch. The other thing, this is a real technical note, reinforce the names of your characters visually and audibly over and over again. Do not assume that your executive will remember them. Put it on the screen and then say it in context over and over again. So find any possible way that you can, because once you get to talking about your episodes, you want to make sure that that executive knows exactly that the main character's name is Mandy, her best friend is Sheila, and her mom's name is Abby. And no question about that. So you can talk a lot more freely about the characters as you're describing your episodes. As you're going through your characters, 5 to 7 characters is probably the sweet spot. I'm fine with 4. Anything less makes your show feel like, there's not a big enough world built out. Anything more than 7, and you're either going too granularly into minor characters, or you have you have too little focus on each character. Really good question that just came in from Facebook. What do you mean by a laugh line for each character within the pitch? So if you're pitching a comedy, in each section, each character section, so you're going to go through character 1, this character is this, and this. By the time you finish talking about that character, the audience needs to have laughed one time. That is the number one rule with comedy pitches, is your executives need to be laughing. Because if I listen to a comedy pitch and I haven't laughed once, that's an instant pass. So we want every character to be able to create some kind of humor on the show, either self-generating or the way that they're reacting to things. So each of those characters needs to have something that in their section that makes the executive laugh. So that's what I mean by a laugh line for each character. Great question. Character is a huge thing. Before I move on to the next section, any more questions on characters? I feel like we're actually making good time. I am amazed because I know that that can be pretty wordy. So I'm going to take a minute to breathe here. And if y'all have any questions about characters or anything else that we talked about, feel free to throw it in those comments. And if not, we'll move on to the rules of the world. All right, cool. Feel free to keep sending in those comments. I'm happy to pause as I'm going through all of this to address those, because honestly, the questions that you guys have, those are the most important things to me. So now we're talking about the world and the rules of the world. So what we do here, this is what I call this a wild card location, because it can really go anywhere in your pitch. It all matters, what your show is and how much information you need to the viewer needs to know before they get into the meat and potatoes of your show. Question that just came in: how much time do you spend on each section in your overall pitch? That's a great question. It definitely varies from pitch to pitch. I would say the sweet spot where you want to spend most of your time is your characters and your episodes. If we're doing some basic math, so you've got an intro, series overview. Those should be pretty quick. We're talking 2-3 minutes. Characters, depending on how in-depth your main character is, you could spend up to 5 minutes with them, but I would keep it 2 to 3. And that whole character section, you might want somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. You never want to get too bogged down into any one section, but it really is very specific to each individual pitch. Um, so yeah, thinking about the rules of the world. And sorry that I don't have a more specific answer for that. But as we dig in over the next few weeks, we'll definitely be able to look at the specific amount of time you need to spend in each place. Uh, so with the world, you want to lay out everything that we need to know about how this show functions. This section will be longer if you're pitching something higher concept. And when we say higher concept, things in the sci-fi realm, things that have a lot of backstory. Um, that's going to take up a lot more time explaining how the world works as opposed to this is a show about six friends just hanging out. That section is going to be pretty quick. Like I said, the location within the pitch for this section, very fluid. There might be key things you need to know before we meet the characters, or the section might be best served towards the end. But it should definitely come before you start talking about season arcs and usually before episodes. It'll also include all the information about where most of the episodes will take place. So that's where we'll dig into setting, give us a little idea of where they live and if it has an effect on the show itself. If the location is a character on the show, like, that was always the cliche that they talked about with Sex in the City, right? Is the fifth character is New York. Moving on, we're now going to look at the pilot episode. So after you go through your characters, after you go through the rules of the world, then you're going to start laying out what episodes look like on this show. You want to spend a good amount of time here, but you don't want to get bogged down in the minutia of plot. So the pilot, that is your first and most in-depth of the sample episodes you're going to be presenting. Almost always in a pitch, you want one of your sample episodes to be the pilot, because if it's not, you're going to get questions about it afterwards. Focus on the essentials that the executive needs to know to buy the pitch and stay away from beat by beat explanation. The golden rule that I use here is to always remember you care a lot more about your story than the person listening does. So you don't have to get bogged down into making sure they understand the ins and outs of every convoluted story piece that you have in here. Err on the side of brevity and focus on the important elements of each act in this episode. You also don't necessarily need to walk us all the way through to the end of the story. You can leave us at a bit of a cliffhanger in the third act if that's going to end up leaving us more excited. So don't feel like you need to explain everything. The big thing is if you have a premise pilot, you absolutely have to include that pilot in your sample episodes. You need to tell us how we got to where this show is going, and that's going to happen in the pilot. So after you finish up the pilot, and the pilot should be the longest of your sample episodes, the thing that you're going to want to hit on with your sample episodes is one of two approaches. Number one is rapid fire log lines. If your show is best served, like if your show is kind of a story of the week comedy, it might be better for you to just rifle off, anywhere between 5 to 10 different log lines from your episodes that just convey to that buyer, oh my God, this show is going to be hilarious. It has all of these different places that you can go. The more common approach that usually takes a little bit more work is honing in on 2 to 3 sample episodes. Like I said, ultimately, which approach you take depends on what supports your show the best. What's going to give me, the executive, the best idea of what this show can be and what's going to get me the most excited about this show. There's two main goals to the sample episode section. Number one, get the executive excited about the possibilities with this series. By the end of this section, we want the executive saying over and over again, oh my God, I really want to see that. Oh, I want to see that episode. Or we also want them to get to a point where they can literally start pitching us their own episodes because we've been so clear about our characters. They understand where the stories are coming from. They understand who would do what in what situation, and they're almost pitching their own episodes. That's always a good sign. The other main goal, so first we want to get the executive excited about the possibilities. The other main goal, prove that this idea has a lot of meat on the bone. There are tons of places that you can go, right? That's something that you want to say in your pitch, but more than anything, you want to show in your pitch, right? That's what the sample episodes do, is it gives you different flavors of what this show is going to be. One episode is going to be, if we're thinking about our favorite shows, if you were pitching The Office, you would say, oh, okay, so in one episode, Michael cooks his foot, and it's gonna be a real Michael centric episode. Another episode, the entire staff goes to beach games to determine who the new manager is going to be. You're rifling off these different places where the show can go. One key piece of advice: do not hold rigidly to the idea that your season will be X number of episodes. A lot of times I get pitches where the writer tells me in their pitch, so it's going to be 12 episodes. Episode 1 is this, episode 2 is this. And my response is always, you don't get to decide how many episodes you get. That's your network's decision. You can lay out where you want to go, you can lay out the general idea, but if you have already decided this is a story that needs to be told in exactly 13 parts, well, what happens if you only get an eight episode order? Or if you tell me in the pitch, we have 6 clear hour-long episodes, what if I get really excited and I like your idea and I want to give you 13 episodes? Are you just going to say no? Right? So don't go into your sample episode section talking about how you have a rigid number of episodes already designed. That is definitely not something for you to decide. Which then brings us to season arcs. So you've gone through your characters, you've laid out your pilot, you've explained to us how the world works, you've walked us through some of your sample episodes. We have a really good idea about what this show looks like. Ideally, as an executive, I'm excited. I've already probably made a decision that I want to see more of this. This is where you really bring it home and prove the hypothesis of your show. That where you prove, yes, this is a show that can go on and on and on. I have a vision for it. So as you walk through season arcs, obviously focus on season 1 first and walk us through the big arc of the season, both in the entirety of the show. Is there one specific place where we're going, and in the characters' individual journeys. Talk to us about how the characters are going to change over the course of the season. Is there a goal that they're trying to achieve? Where are we going to find ourselves at the end of the season? And this is necessary even if your show isn't serialized, right? So if you're telling me like, oh, it's just kind of, an adventure of the week, or, it's just standalone episode comedy, I don't really need to walk you through the entirety of the season. Like, there should be a place that you're going to. We should see some type of growth in the characters. The show should change in some way. Even the best shows, your characters are dynamic people and they are changing. So give us a little idea of where you want to go and what you want to see develop on the show. It doesn't need to be serialized, but it does need to be intentional. And then from that first season, you're going to walk us through future seasons. Depending on the nature of the show, you may want to build a long roadmap, or you might just want to give us a more general vision for where you can see things going. And to follow up on an earlier point, stay away from rigid statements like, I've planned out every episode of the entire 6-season series, along with the follow-up film and the accompanying app. I am flexible, on color scheme with the app, though. So, I'm easy to work with. When I hear that statement, and I hear it a lot from creators, it tells me that you're going to be a pain in the ass to work with and that you haven't prepared to collaborate. Because keep in mind, everyone that you're pitching to is a potential collaborator, and you need to show them that you're easy to work with. So when you say, this is my vision, I'm an auteur, leave me alone, that rubs executives the wrong way. What we want to do in future seasons is show that you have a vision for the future of the series, but that you also understand the nature of the creative process. Show that you're easy to work with. In this section, depending on the type of the show, you can go hit the arc of season 2 and the arc of season 3. Anything more than that, just go to a general future seasons. or you may just want to give a more general roadmap of, hey, here's the vision for what we have for the future of this show. This is going to happen. This is going to happen a little ways down the road. They're finally going to get together, all that kind of stuff. If you have a big twist somewhere that turns the series on the head, this is the place to share it, right? We've established this story. I hopefully gotten the executive invested. If you're Michael Schur and you're pitching The Good Place, I guarantee you that he pitched that twist at the end of season one in his pitch. That's a huge thing for executives where you go, okay, now I think now you know this story. Here's something that changes it completely. When you have that clever twist, that's what can sell your show. So those are the essential elements of the pitch. There are also a few different optional elements that I'm going to touch on very, very lightly. They also are wildcard locations, similar to the world or the rules of the world. They can go anywhere. It's ultimately up to what supports your pitch the best. Number one is tone. You might have a section in there talking about the specific tone of your series, talking about how you want to make the audience feel, why you feel like it's important in this particular time, giving us a sense of what type of comedy it's going to come from. When you're talking about tone, you can also even talk about just like a little bit of your vision, a little bit of what's funny to you. All of that can go into that tone section. And also in that tone section, feel free to use comps. Feel free to use other shows where you go, we want the heart of Schitt's Creek, but we want the laugh out loud hard jokes of 30 Rock. You can use those comps to get across a lot of the shorthand so you don't have to do a lot of explaining. Along those same lines, a lot of times tone gets combined with themes. A light overview of the things you want to dig into with your show. Ideally, you're weaving the themes throughout and it's kind of self-evident, but I've seen pitches that work really well where they do have a section talking about the themes that you want to explore, talking about things like, we want to ask the question of what does it mean to truly be a family? We want to explore the feelings of loneliness. We want to explore what it's like to be a person in a new city. That theme section can really set you up nicely as you go into your episodes. Another optional element that you can drop in here, especially if it's an animated project, but for any kind of show, visual style. What is your show going to look like? You can talk about the cinematography if you have a background in that, but give us a sense of what the show is going to look like visually, what is going to be on our screens. And again, easy place to use comps. And then the last optional element that I have in here is influences. Where does this show draw its inspiration from? This is a place for you to talk a little bit personally, to talk about, hey, I grew up a huge fan of this, this, and this, and that led me to create my series. You might also want to talk about visual influences, thematic influences, anything under the sun. Keep it short, but yeah, it can really help get across a little bit more of that shorthand that we were talking about. Finally, when you wrap up, it is absolutely imperative that you have an actual conclusion to your pitch. The number of times that I've had a pitch where the person on the other end ends it with, and that's it, you're missing a free opportunity. It's a free opportunity to sum everything up and to really get across to that executive that you know what the hell you're doing and that you're a pro at this, right? The thing I always emphasize over and over again is that at all times in a pitch, you're conveying shorthand. You're telling an executive things, right? So by having an actual conclusion, it shows that you know what you're doing, that you did your homework, and that you're always going to come in prepared. So make sure to put a bow on the entire pitch. Because the other thing that this does is it reinforces everything that you just spent 20 minutes talking about. Re-emphasize your excitement about the series and the places it can go. Make sure that you're speaking with passion, that you're talking about this idea that you freaking love. Make it fun in the room and The other thing, once the executives see your last slide, and typically in your PowerPoint presentation or keynote or whatever it is, once they see that last slide, it's usually either the cover repeated or it says the name of the show. Executives, we always know when the last slide is there. Once they see that last slide, a countdown clock starts for them because they know they're close to the end, right? It's like when you were in class in school and you had somebody writing a paper and they said, in conclusion, your brain immediately goes, okay, sweet, we're at the end. I can start checking out. So once they see your last slide, start wrapping it up quick because that clock has started. And then end strong with a definitive final statement so it's clear that you're done. Don't end with, and that's all we have today. Thanks. Make sure that that conclusion is an actual, firm, hard conclusion. Um, and while that's the conclusion to the pitch, that's not the conclusion to our class today because in a pitch, your conclusion is always followed up by Q&A with the executives. So make sure that you're going into your pitch expecting questions from executives, but don't be disappointed if you don't get them. Almost always, though, you're going to get a question from an executive, either a clarification, either more information about something that they liked, or if you didn't explain something properly, they might ask you about it, or they might, I've had executives get very pointed as well. They might say, how is this show different from something that's already on the air? They might say, how is this show different from Schitt's Creek? It feels like a repeat of Schitt's Creek. And you have to answer that right on your toes. It's where an improv background comes in handy big time. It's one technique that I love to do and that I encourage a lot of my creators to do. It's absolutely great to leave breadcrumbs in your pitch to set up a question in Q&A, especially if you have a section in the pitch that's running a little bit long. You're like, I want to talk about this, but like it just doesn't fit in here. If you leave something a little bit vague, and this is a little bit of a nuanced skill that you'll learn as you develop your skills as a pitcher, but if you can leave a breadcrumb that's then going to lead to a question that you've prepared, then your money, you're going to be able to answer that question immediately. Now, when it comes to your answers to these questions, keep your answers brief and make sure that they end with periods. Make sure that your statements that you're making are definitive statements. Don't just let them end like that. Speak very definitively. Speak like you are the expert on your show. Your goal in this section is to convey that you know this show inside and out. And also, you might get a question that you don't know. There are two very good techniques there. As I mentioned earlier, you said yes to the water bottle. So you guys got a question that you did not have any idea that you were going to be getting, and you have no idea how to answer it. So, that's a really good question. We were actually just talking about that yesterday, and and you've stalled yourself for at least 10 to 15 seconds so that you can grab your bearings and figure out what the hell you're going to say. The other thing, great, wonderful question that we just got. Can you give an example of a tough question that was asked of you? Let's see, off the top of my head, I would say oftentimes the toughest questions that I've gotten are questions about. All right, I'll give you one in a pitch that I was just in. I was producing a show, and I was asked about the visual style, and I was just on as a producer, so I was not doing most of the talking. So I got a question of, now, Carlo, I know you have a background in the visuals. Can you speak a little bit to that? I went, okay, and had to grab my bearings. Most often, the toughest questions are going to be the most general. So that's something to write down and keep in mind is if you get a question that's very pointed of like, oh, does your main character, do they have a special relationship with their mom? You can answer that yes or no and know the backstory. But if it's, can you give us a little bit more of an idea of the main themes of the show, something that's general, that's going to be a lot tougher, and that's going to take you a minute, and and that's why you want to be able to stall. But the other thing that is huge that I always emphasize, be honest, be a person. If you haven't thought of something, let them know. You can use this phrase. You know what? That's something that we actually hadn't addressed, but we're gonna go back and we're gonna take a look at it. Um, Honesty goes so far. Being genuine goes so far, especially in an industry where you get BS all of the time. And if you level with them and go, "That's an awesome question. I haven't dug into that. That's somewhere that we want to explore, and I will get back to you on that." That's really powerful, and those are the types of people that I, as an executive, always want to work with. Um, if you're working with a partner and you're pitching with a partner, don't worry about being polite in the Q&A. Jump forward with your answer as quickly as you can because silence is death in this environment. Um, a lot of times, especially when I'm first starting to work with creators, when we get to that Q&A section, because I will sit there and play fake executive with them. I will rifle off the hard questions they probably haven't thought about yet. One that a tough question that I always like to give my creators is, if I was to give you an unlimited budget, how does that change the show? Or you said that the show is 15 minutes, a quarter hour show. What would you do if I ordered a 30-minute show? Asking them those kinds of questions to see what their vision of the show is. Um, and to give them that ability to practice. But what I see a lot of times, especially early on, if you're working with a partner, you don't know if you're supposed to be the one to answer or if they're going to answer. Don't worry about being polite. Apologize afterwards if you need to, but just jump forward with your question because you know the most about your show. And then be careful tagging on to your partner's answers to questions. Too much piling on can feel like overcompensating and over explaining. Eventually, it just becomes noise. And then stay away from answering questions like the wife in Coming to America. If you guys remember Coming to America, the Eddie Murphy's first wife, her response to everything was, "Whatever you like." And a lot of times, I will get that type of response from a creator in a pitch when I'm asking them questions where I say, "All right, so what's the format of the show? Is it 15 minutes or is it 30 minutes?" And a lot of times I'll hear, Whatever you guys want it to be." Okay, cool. Is the best version of the show TV PG, or is there a lot of profanity? We can really just we can work it however we need to. We really feel like the show's flexible in that way. Like that tells me that you have not yet made the hard decisions that come with creating a series. And I understand the impulse. The impulse is you want to be polite, you want to show that executive, like we were talking about earlier, that you're easy to work with. But in particular, those questions and that type of answer tells me that you haven't sat down and gone, all right, we have to figure out what the best version of this show is. And that is painful. That's a difficult thing to do. I've done it myself enough times to know how hard it is. And so when I hear whatever you like, I know that creator A isn't experienced enough to know that they have to make those decisions, and B is too scared to make those decisions. And I, as an executive, am not going to make those decisions for them. And a lot of times the question pops up in a creator's mind, like, well, what if I tell them 30 minutes and then they don't buy it because they only wanted 15s? And it's like, if they like your show, they'll buy it and tell you what they have. So you don't need to worry about that. Just give a vision for the show and give something that you believe in. So we have a few minutes left here. I'm very proud of myself that I was able to get through all of that information in under an hour. So I'm going to walk you all through what the next few weeks of class look like, and then I'm going to open up the floor for some questions. So feel free to start sending me questions right now that we'll dig into in the next few minutes here. So next week, the thing that we are going to dig into is the beginning of your pitch. What to do before your pitch. That means your preparation, the pre-pitch, and then we're going to talk about the intro and the series overview. So we're going to dig into each of those sections. We will probably spend, roughly 20 minutes on each of those sections. Also, y'all can feel free to contact me either via Catalyst or on social media. I'm at Carlo Moss everywhere. And we can talk about any questions that you all have in regards to pitching. So next week is going to be pre-pitch, intro, and series overview. And then week 3, which is September 2nd, that's going to be the pilot and the sample episodes. So that class is going to be all about episodes. I'm sorry. Week 3 is characters. Week 4 is episodes. So week 3, all about that characters section. That thing's going to be a beast. So that's why in week 3 we only touch on characters. Week 4, pilot and sample episodes. Week 5, which is September 16th, is going to be the world and season arcs. And then week 6 is the optionals that we talked about, things like theme, visual style, influences, all of that stuff. Then we're going to work on conclusion and the Q&A section. And then week 7 is going to be in person at Catalyst. And the things that we're going to be discussing there are the performance of the pitch, my golden rules for pitching, the importance of what I call connective tissue in each of your sections, and then my personal pitch tips. So that's going to be the next 7 weeks of our lives. And as we're going through that, I want to reiterate, this is what I do professionally. The name of my company is Maranty Media. It's maranty.com. There's a bunch of information there. If you go to that website, all about pitching. If you all have any questions for these last 5 minutes, go ahead and drop them in the comments. But other than that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what the future looks like for this class, and also some ins and outs of pitching and some of my favorite little tips and tricks with the last couple of minutes that we have. Question over here, I may have misheard, but I think you said you had 2 tips for stalling when you don't have the answer to a question. The first was the ever so popular water bottle sip, but do you have another one? Yeah, the other one is honesty. The other one is specifically when you don't have an answer and it's not coming to you and you try to do this, and you went, yeah, great question. Then just level with them. 100% just look them dead in the eye and go, that's actually something that we haven't thought about. And I think, we can dig into it and look at it. But aside from that, just be straight with them. If you can't think of something, that's fine. I'm not going to ding you on points as an executive. I think that's something really important to emphasize. A lot of times we feel like when we're pitching that if we don't perform like we are on stage and we flub a line or we screw something up or we get frustrated or our tech doesn't work right, that's going to ding us on points. From an executive point of view, I know that happens. I don't care. If your material is there and you've explained it thoroughly and you're on point, that's all that I care about. Do I get the story? Do I understand it? Great. Did you flub a line? Who cares? So that's something that's huge, huge, huge. Obviously, we want to rehearse. We want to be as good as we can in the performance, but we're all humans. We're all going to screw up. So accept that and understand, that doesn't disqualify me because I forgot a line or I forgot a section. If you come in unprepared, that's a whole different story. That's going to hurt your chances of selling your show big time. But aside from that, don't worry about flubbing a line. As Ted Lasso says, be a goldfish. Just forget about it. Keep moving on. Focus on your thing. Another piece of advice that I want to give you all: if you are pitching on Zoom, do not show video. This is something that has become an absolute best practice for me. Do not share a video because your video is beholden to everybody's lag time on the Zoom. If one person has crappy internet, it screws up everything. So if you have a trailer, if you have a sizzle, send it ahead of time. And when you finish your pitch, you should be sending a separate pitch packet as a follow-up. Aside from reinforcing everything, it gives you an opportunity to reconnect with that executive. Another great question just came in. Do you find that pitching for network television differs from pitching to a streaming service? Um, so we can lump in here when we say network. We're not just talking about just the broadcast, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, but also your Comedy Centrals, AMC, Adult Swim, um, HBO. Did you guys lose me? Let me know if you can still hear me. Um, but pitching for network versus streaming services, right now, there's not a huge difference. Um, I would say okay, I'm still there. All right, great. Awesome. Um, so obviously there are gonna be differences in content. If you're pitching to Fox, it's the way that you position things are going to be different from the way that you pitch to, say, HBO. Um, and so know your audience in that way. For example, Fox, when they pick up animation, they have to have a family of some sort. And so that's something that you have to know. And if your show doesn't have that, well, then you shouldn't pitch to Fox. Um, and the way that networks and streamers differ the most, I think, is just in their individual mandates. Um, and a lot of times, what's happening now is you're pitching to somebody who is in charge of content for both a network and that network streaming service. So there's not a ton of difference in there. So like you might, I just had a pitch that was all of Warner. So it was HBO Max and Adult Swim. It was an animated show. And so you're not just pitching a streaming service or a channel, you're pitching both at the same time. Same thing, the buyers for Paramount Plus a lot of times are also the buyers for Comedy Central and Viacom at large. So as the industry continues to evolve at a rapid pace, uh, the difference between pitching to a network and pitching to a streamer is shrinking, and it's becoming more and more dependent on the particulars of each individual network. Um, I hope that helped answer your question. Um, we are at 6 o'clock on the West Coast on my time. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Between now and next week, I hope that this was informative to y'all. I would love to hear any questions that you guys have on any aspect of the pitch. We'll start next week off with any questions that I get from you. And then we'll go into the intro and all of the intro and the series overview and the pre-pitch. But I'll start next week off with Q&A. One more question that we got, may be obvious, but is the pitch packet a hard copy of your presentation? Ideally, no. Um, your presentation should have very few words on it. The pitch packet should largely be the kind of text version of what you said. Um, the presentation is just going to be a keynote or a PowerPoint that's going to play on the screen. So, you're talking about the character. And then while you're talking, you've got the character's face and their name really big and bright to reinforce it. And that's it. And like a cool background behind them. But your pitch packet that you send afterwards, your pitch deck, which is, I think, kind of the most used term now, the pitch deck is not only going to have that image of the character, their name, but it's going to have the explanation of that character. It's going to have their story in there. So for the most part, you can repeat what you said and put it onto paper, and that's what you send afterwards. The other reason why I like doing that is because when I do a presentation for a network, usually they'll ask me, "Hey, can you send that presentation so we can share with the team?" And then I'm able to say, "I can send that, but I actually have something even better. It's a full pitch deck that explains everything." So you're doing the work for that executive. They don't have to remember anything. They don't have to come up with their own version of stuff. They can just share that right along with the team. So That is going to be it for today. Like I said, send me questions. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And I'm really excited to get going with this and to get you all pitching like professionals and selling a whole bunch of shows. I'm looking forward to some success stories out of this class. So thanks again for taking the time, and I will see you all next week. Bye.